Okay, good evening everyone.
What was the name? I got it, but.
It's a good name for that. That's in New Jersey,
Should receive a living wage, we consider the following. Will taking another job jeopardize their performance of a vital task? Are they in a position to take bribes? Do they require the public's respect? The Jewish notion of charity obligates everyone, not just the employer, to contribute funds for the poor person's needs. When the public does not provide sufficient funds for the poor, people of means must meet this obligation. The employer's obligation is no different from that of other people of means. Communal funds are best directed toward job creation rather than demeaning handouts. Living off charity is forbidden when one is able but unwilling to work. Employers must show employees generosity and kindness. Manhattan is one of the most vibrant cities in the world. From great business opportunities to museums, restaurants, and nightlife, the streets of New York City pulsate with an unmistakable rhythm that serves 8 million residents and attracts 45 million annual visitors. Yet amongst the countless workers who service one of the most expensive cities in the United States, there are many struggling to make ends meet. 41-year-old Joseph Schiraldi guards one of the top terrorist targets in the world, the Empire State Building. For 8 hours a day, he X-rays packages, checks visitors' IDs, and patrols the concourse. But on a salary of $7.50 an hour, he's a security officer without security. No pension, no health care, and no paid sick days, which is typical for a non-union guard. Teresa Faber is a commercial cleaner. On her salary of $8.50 an hour, she can't afford childcare for her 9-year-old son, Christian. Every day after school, Christian waits for her in a dilapidated Upper Manhattan library, where children line up 5 deep to use one of 2 computers. The librarian doubles as a de facto babysitter for 40 or so other kids of the working poor.
The outsourcing of jobs,
Outsourcing deals.
shipping jobs overseas.
Jobs outside the United States.
In the past few years, the loss of lucrative white-collar work offshore has dominated news headlines, provoking economic anxiety among middle-class families who fear they may be next. But for the nation's working poor, for whom the raises come in dimes, the sick days go unpaid, and the benefits are out of reach. There's an equally troubling, yet more often overlooked problem. Today, more than 28 million people, about a quarter of the United States workforce between the ages of 18 and 64, earn less than $9.04 an hour, which translates into a full-time salary of $18,800 a year. This income marks the federal poverty line for a family of 4.
So, what do you think about minimum wages? Should be raised or not?
Shouldn't exist. been proven by many studies that minimum wage actually costs jobs for young people. And many a young person like me learned how to work as a teenager by people who are willing to pay a small amount, and you get job training. All you do is you price out kids who won't get a job at all, because it becomes prohibitive. Somebody might hire somebody for $5 or $6 an hour.
But you know very well it's only one opinion.
Hmm?
You know very well that's only one opinion. It's
You
not
asked the
everyone's
question, I
opinion.
gave you an answer.
But that's your opinion.
It's not my opinion, it's the opinion of some pretty brilliant reports that I've read on this
Okay.
subject.
But the question is, why would the government would listen to such brilliant reports? If such brilliant reports, perhaps the government should follow
Because the
reports.
government wants as many people to be dependent on it and not self-sufficient, that's why.
Well, basically what you're saying, the government wants people not to pay taxes, which doesn't make sense either.
The government doesn't support the country by taxes, by income taxes. It supports by borrowing and by printing and by other taxes. The income tax is inconsequential in the support of the government.
So based on what we just saw, the story of a guy who's working for $7.50 an hour, making $18,500 a year, do you think this person can survive?
People can't survive on a lot higher salaries than that.
Correct. So how would we expect not to have, at least to say, let's raise the minimum wage? I mean, a few days ago, I just was driving my car, I heard there's a whole debate in Albany to raise the minimum wage. And the governor said, in general, I'm for it. But I need to see it first, what's the proposal before I approve it. So, I mean, the whole idea of minimum wage started from Roosevelt, 1901. The whole change started 1901, 1938, I don't remember.
And we've got more people in poverty than ever.
Okay, so the question is, what's the solution?
Free markets.
Or free markets plus tzedakah. People should, out of their own volition, offer tzedakah to help those that are in need.
Is there an obligation on anyone to offer tzedakah? Tzedakah is voluntarily, or tzedakah is something that you have to give?
Jewish law says you must give.
But then you choose where you want to give your money, don't you?
As long as you give it out.
Okay, so who says you'll help the poor? You can choose something else. And what's going to be with the poor people? So what's the system that the Torah suggests?
That's different. The difference between Torah and the filthy government, two different things.
Well, let's see what's the Torah suggests.
Training,
Huh?
training,
Training
teaching.
is a good idea. But the question is there a way to help people? And what is the best way to help people? You have a way to help people?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Is to give them a job rather than just give them charity, so they can be dependent on their own.
How many jobs do you have available in your company?
Me, I'm looking for a job myself.
Maimonides said that the highest form of charity is to teach
Correct.
people in the way of business.
Fish, and not to give them a fish. Right?
Right.
To teach them how to fish. But let's just share a story of the Baal Shem Tov first, as an introduction for our famous story that in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, there was a very wealthy man who had a friend who was a very poor man. And they were the best friends you can find. They trusted each other, no questions asked. The wealthy man had to travel. And in those days he had a lot of gold, physically gold, diamonds in his home. Who would he trust to keep the gold before he comes back?
His wife.
I don't know if he had a wife or not, it doesn't say about that story, but he had children. But he still didn't give it to the children. He went to his friend and told his friend, would you watch it for me? Friend said, absolutely, what's the question? So he brought those boxes with gold into the basement of his friend. And he went to travel far east. And he was traveling, time passed by, and the poor man unfortunately got sick, and a short time later he passed on. And when he passed away, the children had a funeral, obviously, said Shiva. After Shiva, he was a poor man. They went to clean out the house. And when they cleaned the basement, they discovered, wow, look what our father had. Gold and gold, like there was nothing to be found. They counted, and they decided to divide the money. Overnight they became multi-millionaires. They built huge mansions in the town, and they became the wealthiest people in town. All that took a very short time. A year later, the wealthy man comes back. And the first place where he's going, he wants to go to his friend to pick up his gold. And as he is going, he heard his friend passed away. And then he hears that the children are living like a wealthy people. Connects immediately. So he comes immediately to them and says, listen, this is my gold, my money. He says, really? Do you have any paper? Do you have anything to show, to prove it? No. I trust your father. Your father didn't need a paper. I didn't need a paper from your father. I trusted him. We don't know nothing about it. We never heard about it. So they go to court. They go to court, and the story goes that the Beit Din, the rabbinical court, the first question they ask the wealthy man, any proof? Hamotzi mechavero alav arayah. That's a very basic rule in the Talmud. You want to take out any money from your friend? You have to prove it. The wealthy man had nothing. What was the ruling of the Beit Din? Sorry to tell you, there is no proof that the money belongs to you. When you bring a proof, we'll give it back to you. Till then, it belongs to the children.
People from the town didn't know this guy's a big gavir, a big...
Yeah, but they don't know what his money went. Maybe he went to the Far East to do business and he lost all his money. How would they know? How would they know that this poor man was really a poor man? Maybe he was really a very wealthy man. He just didn't want to share with anyone the knowledge. So the bottom line is, the Beit Din said, the money will stay wherever it is. That is the rule of the law, the rule of the Torah. So one of the followers of the Baal Shem Tov, that town, came to the Baal Shem Tov and said to the Baal Shem Tov, I don't understand. We all know the truth that the money really belonged to the wealthy man. How come that the Torah, which is Torat Emet, a true, real Torah, doesn't reflect this in the wisdom to show how the money can go back to the wealthy man? And the Baal Shem Tov told him, to understand that, I want you tomorrow to take a walk outside of the town, walk about 5 miles down the road, and there is a tree there, a huge tree. I want you to climb up on top of the tree and watch what's going to be there. A whole day I want you to be on top of the tree. By the end of the day you should come back to me. And the whole day, early morning, first of all he went there, got on top of the tree so no one can see, and he is watching what's happening. It was quiet. Next to the tree was a little river, some water. In the middle of the day, in noontime, he sees a wealthy man riding his horse, shows up, stops by the tree, takes a little bit of water. He had a belt full of gold and diamonds. And he wants to cool off, so he opens up the belt, rests a little bit, takes a nap. 15 minutes later he wakes up. Wow, it's late. Jumps on the horse and drives away. As it drives away, another wealthy man shows up. And he shows up, also take a little bit of water to rest, and he sees a belt full of gold and diamonds. He picks up the belt, gets back on his horse and moves on. Doesn't stop for a second. Half an hour later, shows up a poor man, walking, tired, broken, torn clothes. And finally he reaches the tree, lays down, falls asleep. And as he sleeps, half an hour later, suddenly shows up the first wealthy man who left the money. He wakes up the poor man, says to him, "Where is my money?" The poor man says, "Money? What money?" He hits him, starts beating him up. "You are a thief, you took away my money, you better give it to me. I left it here before you came." And the poor man says, "I don't know what you're talking about." So he doesn't believe him, he starts tearing his clothes and is beating him up. But after beating him for an hour or two, he realized that the poor man really doesn't have nothing. He left him alone, bleeding, took his horse and left. That's all what he saw. By the end of the day, he comes back to the Baal Shem Tov and says, "That's the story I saw. Do I understand? I don't understand nothing." The Baal Shem Tov says, "Well, whatever you saw is this first wealthy man who lost the money was the child of the poor man who got the money now from the wealthy man. This other wealthy man who found the money was the wealthy man who lost the money in this generation. Next generation, he got it back. It was a reincarnation. So, although it seems like now, in the previous generation, one wealthy man gave the money to the other wealthy man, in this generation went back, the wealth went back to the original owner, which was the child of the poor man, which was the first wealthy man who lost the money. So he says, if that's the case, who was the poor man who got beaten up? The question is, the answer is correct, the judge. But why was he beaten up? Why did he deserve, the judge that judged according to the Torah, why did he deserve to be beaten up so badly? Did he do anything wrong? That question will remain till the end of the class. And I want you to answer this question when we come to the end of the class. If you have an answer to that question. Why did the judge deserve to be beaten up? Please open up your books. Do you have a book, Shmuel? You want to have a book? You have a book? Right here outside, there is a box. Take a book. So here we learned about the poverty line and the workers at work, the woman who works, has a child, the security man. So who instituted the minimum wages? Let's start with you. Let's go ahead. Page 3228. You want to take a book? Yeah? Outside the box. There is a book.
We stand for a living wage. Wages are subnormal if they fail to provide a living for those who devote their time and energy to industrial occupations. The monetary equivalent of a living wage varies according to local conditions, but must include enough to secure the elements of a normal standard of living, a standard high enough to make morality possible, to provide for education and recreation, to care for immature members of the family, to maintain the family during periods of sickness, and to permit a reasonable savings for old age. Theodore Roosevelt.
So the President of United States realized there is too many people who are suffering. So he says, let's create a system that can assist them to live a life that is going to be a respectful life for them. They can provide for the minimum of the minimum. That was the intention of President Roosevelt. So, 2B, page 32.
Servants, laborers, and workmen of different kinds make up the far greater part of every great political society. But what improves the circumstances of the greater part can never be regarded as any inconveniency to the whole. No society can surely be flourishing and happy of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. It is but equity, besides, that they who feed, clothe, and lodge the whole body of the people should have such a share of the produce of their own labor as to be themselves tolerably well fed, clothed, and lodged.
So here we understand the idea is that the government collects taxes, and the idea is to divide and help those who are less fortunate. So that's why the government has created minimum wages. I'm not going in to discuss the merits of the system, if there is any merits. I'm just saying, speaking about the facts right now. Let's go to page 33, case study.
In 1999, legislation was proposed in Montgomery County, Maryland, requiring all companies contracted by the county to pay its workers a living wage that was substantially more than the minimum wage. The Jewish Community Council of Greater Washington, along with 11 other nonprofit groups, opposed the bill. They feared that the increased costs on nonprofits who hired workers on county contracts would be prohibitive, requiring them to cut programming. Ultimately, the bill was voted down. But in 2002, when the ordinance was amended to exempt nonprofit organizations from having to pay living wages, the Jewish Community Council shifted its position, and with the help of the council's support, the ordinance was passed. The ordinance passed.
Continue the question of discussion.
Should nonprofits be exempt from paying a living wage if doing so impedes their ability to provide services to the community? Why or why not?
And go to the next part. Learning activity 1.
Below are 4 groups that have some ability to alleviate the plight of the working poor. Rank the degree of responsibility each group has for alleviating the problem, with 1 being the group with the greatest responsibility, and 4 being the group with the least responsibility.
So obviously we all understand we live in a community. Community is inclusive. All kind of people, even great men. We have a community that, thank God, doing very well, part of the segment of the community. There's another segment of the community that you can call them middle class. And then there's a third segment of the community that is the lower class, financially I'm talking about. And the question is, whose responsibility is to help the people that cannot meet all their obligations? Is it the individual who has to help? Is it the community, means each shul should help their members? Or there is a community and each community helps totally, globally, the entire community? Or it's the government's responsibility? And to what extent can the government really help, if they can at all give any help? So, to review, first of all, what do you think about the story, the discussion that we had, the case study of the Montgomery County in Maryland? Was the nonprofit exempt? Is that correct or incorrect? To pay the minimum wages?
Living wages.
Huh? Is the
living wages.
Living wages, the same thing.
Not the same.
What's the same? So why are you saying?
Wages are more than minimum wages.
That's the question. According to the government, minimum wages is enough to have a life. Living wages, if you want to increase it, and that's where we will come to the fact where to discuss what is the Torah obligation. To what extent are we obligated to help the poor people? Are we obligated to give them the minimum, or we are obligated to give them the standards of living the way we are living? So that's another question. The question is also, who is responsible to change the situation? So let's go to the box on page 34. There is 1 to 4. The 1 is most responsible. 4 is the least responsible. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah,
Should I answer the question too?
if you can. You
Working
can say your
poor-
opinion at least.
Working poor, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, getting more education, working harder, economizing more, banding together with others to lower costs.
Is this their responsibility
Yes.
first?
Yes, that's the greatest responsibility.
So you're saying number 1?
It's the greatest responsibility.
Okay, next.
The employers of the working poor.
Is the employer of the working poor responsible to give them anything more than their wages?
No,
Not at all? Are you speaking as an employer?
no, I mean health insurance, you're talking about health insurance and other things?
Whatever, let's say an employee comes to his employer and says, I have an issue, I cannot pay my bill, I need to get something, I need to buy health insurance, whatever it is. Is this the obligation of the employer to say, okay, I will help you, here it is?
It depends how good the worker is.
Let's say the worker is not that great.
So it's not his responsibility.
Okay,
He's giving him a job.
so what are you saying? It's, so you'll go to number 4 over here?
I would go, at least, yeah,
Okay, next.
private,
Is everyone agrees with that, by the way?
No.
What do you think?
Well, certainly A, people themselves, yes, but B, C, and D, 0.
B, C, and D is, the least responsible means 4.
They have 0
he's
responsibility.
saying 5.
Ah, okay, all right.
A has.
So you agree with him, actually?
I think if minimum wages are a good idea, we should make the minimum wage $100 an hour for everybody, and everything would be peachy keen. Everybody would be doing great. Why don't we just do that? Because if $9 or $11 is a solution, $50 is a better solution.
And who will pay that?
Question is how many,
Right?
Who will pay that?
Well, you can apply that to anything. Who would pay anything? Well, let's make it $100.
Can be extreme.
Why not?
Or you can be,
because
find
many
a mitigating
businesses
way
can
to
have
do
it
the
just
minimum.
like that.
That's why it's called the minimum wage, it's not the maximum.
can't print money.
Well, the maximum could be $1 million an hour.
So next, C.
Private philanthropists.
So private people, individuals in the community that, thank God, Hashem blessed them with money and they can afford to help. Are they obligated to help or not?
Is your question
But you know,
under
that's
the government or under the Torah? There's 2 different issues.
Under Torah.
Ah, different story.
I'm speaking about under Torah, I'm not speaking about the government.
Yeah, but how
It's
do
a
we
Torah
know?
class.
The government and Jews?
See, in Poland, originally when my father was born, I told you where he's born, I mean, but the community, Jewish community, used to pay for the learners. They used to support the Halberstams, you know what I mean? And they would learn all day, and of course they would remain poor, but the community would support them.
Would they give them minimum wages?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I mean,
Does
they're not gonna-
anyone disagrees with this? So you're saying that what you're saying now is basically the private philanthropists are obligated to pay, yes or no?
They have to support.
Based on the story, what
They
he
have to-
says, they have to
They
support.
have to support
Means
the
you're
poor
saying,
people in town, yeah.
what number? 1, 2, 3, 4. How much are their obligation?
Not everybody, the definition,
If the definition
Because
of 1 is the
definition-
highest, the 4 is the least.
but the definition of a philanthropist is not just a wealthy individual. It's a wealthy individual who performs that function of giving.
If he wants, it's up to him.
Right.
So
No, but
the
he-
question is, how
but
much
he
is he
didn't-
obligated?
If he didn't give, he wouldn't be a philanthropist. He'd
Correct.
just be a wealthy
The
individual.
the question is, how much
Okay,
is he
the
able?
the
is he
government, the
obligated?
federal government, state, number D, they have to, the working poor is the most important. The next is the federal government. The third is the private people. And then the employers have to pay the minimum wage or whatever they agree upon. But if the worker is a lousy worker, he doesn't have to pay him more. If he's a good worker, it's in his best interest to pay him more. so he keeps the good worker.
What happens if the worker has a contract with, what happens if the worker has a contract with the employer? So they know exactly what the
Right.
obligation
If
is.
the worker has a contract with the employer, so then what?
If the worker has a contract with the employer.
Minimum wages.
He's only
So the
bound by,
employer is paying him minimum wages.
so he's bound by whatever.
Not necessarily though, contract, I have a union unfortunately, and I pay the wage, whatever the wages are. But my good workers, in order to keep them from not looking for other jobs and to show appreciation, I give them a nice Hanukkah present. Not called a Hanukkah present though.
So if that's the case, obviously we understand that each person, according to their level of their, whatever employer wants to give them, obviously that's their contract. But we speak about the employees are on the lowest level of employees. On the lowest level. And that level of employees getting, let's say their work is valued $5 an hour, not more. But the minimum wage is now, let's say, $10. Is that good or not good? It means the employer is losing $5 an hour every hour with this employee. Should there be such a system? Okay, a person, even they produce only $5 an hour, they should have something more to live on. Or we have to give them only whatever they deserve. And the rest, there's other ways to help them out. That's the question.
Why are we talking only about employee and employer? Let's say there is a landlord, he has apartments, and one of the tenants, he knows that the guy cannot pay the rent. Should he just let him not pay the rent? Should he lower the rent for him because he cannot afford it?
That's the obligation, and the question is of number 3. Private philanthropy. He's a private individual. That's his business, how he produces income to support his family by renting out apartments. So now the question is, and maybe with that he has to pay mortgage, with that he has to pay maintenance, there is other expenses. So if one person doesn't pay him, it makes a dent in the whole creation of this enterprise. Is he obligated to take the responsibility on himself? Is that his responsibility if a person cannot afford? Or there is a community who is obligated to help him? He's an individual, he will help to the community also.
Well, a portion of his profits can go into a communal fund, but he shouldn't bear the
He
liability.
can choose how much profit he wants to put into the communal fund, and the communal fund should go perhaps assisting the poor person who needs help to pay rent. But otherwise, you put all the responsibility on the owner of the building. Why is it his fault to take the responsibility of that family? That's the question. Can we impose on that person since, you own the building, perhaps you have some extra fat, you can help, share it. It's like an employer maybe. Can you impose on an employer to give extra, even though the employer is not obligated? That's the question. It's a very similar question. Let's open up page 35. We'll take a case number 2. We had that before, case number 1, which was about the community. And now there is a true story that happened. Who wants to read next? Perla? Want to read it? Go ahead.
A community rabbi in Europe asked the congregation for a pay raise. He justified his request by pointing to the growth of his family since the term of his contract began. He said that he had agreed to the negotiated wages because it met his needs at the time, but now he had a larger family, he needed more to make ends meet. He also pointed to the fact that as a result of inflation, his current salary had lost much of its buying power. It was true that the value of his contract had eroded since the time it had been signed, but the congregation was not rolling in money. Given the economically difficult times, they could not easily come up with the increase that he wanted. Rabbi Moshe Sofer was asked to decide whether the congregation was required to comply with his request. Based on Rabbi Moshe Sofer's response.
This is a question only. And the question is, continue, the question for discussion.
Do you think the congregation should be required to increase the rabbi's wage? Why or why not?
So here we understand that this rabbi is serving this community, and the needs of the rabbi are growing, and as it's happening in many places, the money is losing its value, and the contract that was signed a while ago, it's not the same value. So the rabbi is asking for more. Should he be given or not? The congregation cannot make this decision, obviously, because they are personally involved. The rabbi cannot make this decision because it has to do with him as well. So who has to make this decision? This question went to a very famous rabbi, the Khatam Sofer. And the Khatam Sofer got this question, what should we do now? And the Khatam Sofer had to give an answer, but we will wait with the answer because we have to learn how to achieve the answer. So I'm not going to give you the answer right away. We have to come up with the answer. So first we will learn about the background a little bit, so we understand where we are. So let's open up on page 36 and let's finish that part, text 3.
The residents of a city have the authority to fix wage and measures, to set market prices, to set wages for workers, and to inflict penalties for infringement of the rules.
So the Talmud says that the leaders of the town, including the representatives of the town, they can create measures, market prices, and set wages for workers. What's the average wage? What's the going rate in this town? It means they somehow, in order to move the economy, they have to set certain standards. And the question for discussion, go ahead, finish with that one.
What does this text tell you, and what does it not tell you about the government legislation of a minimum or living wage?
So what does it tell you? Based on Rasha'im b'nei ha'ir la'atnot, if the residents of the city have the authority to fix wages, measurements, does it seem like free market? Does it seem like you can make your own decisions? Or it seems like the government has the authority to set limits and measurements and so on?
The government can set minimums. It doesn't say living wage, but it can establish the standards, maximums, minimums.
So obviously we understand the government is entitled. If the government wants to create a minimum wage, they're entitled. The question is only, what does the Jewish law says about it?
But it doesn't say the government, it says the
People of the town.
residents.
Yeah, obviously. What's the government today? If you are elected official and they don't like you, they'll not elect you again. So if you represent the town and you are elected, especially in the small cities, the elected official has to be representing the people of the town.
So in this passage, the residents of
The
city
residents
are the
means to
equivalent
the
of
elected
government?
official.
Okay. So in that case-
And they vote. Let's say there is a question, should we do that or not? And the question goes on vote, and the people, while they elect, they go to vote. Yes or no? It says they are permitted but it doesn't say they're obligated. It's a big, big difference. They are permitted to set, not they are obligated to set. What is the difference between the obligation and the permission? So, if you open up page 37, 4a, the Torah says clearly, when you buy or you sell from your friend, from your fellow man, do not wrong one another. Don't try to cheat each other. Be honest, open, and sincere as we studied last week. Obviously, last week, if you recall, we spoke about the question of Anah, but I don't want to go into that question again, because we're going to discuss a different topic. And the different topic is, we're going to jump a little bit to page 39, 5a. Bob, you want to continue?
The scholars who taught the priests the laws of ritual slaughter received their wages from the temple fund. The scholars who taught the priests the rules of Kimitzah received their wages from the temple fund. The scribes in Jerusalem who would review the accuracy of the Torah scrolls received their wages from the temple fund. The women who wove the temple curtains received their wages from the temple fund.
Next, 5b.
The judges in Jerusalem who levied fines would take their wages from the temple fund. 99 meneh. If this did not suffice for their needs, their wages were raised, even if they refused.
Question for discussion, read page 40.
In what way are the wages of the judges different from the wages of the employees mentioned in text 5a?
What's the difference between 5a and 5b, Bob? Do you see a difference?
Yeah, the last sentence.
So the judges would not
In 1 and
accept
5a, I'm sorry.
bribes.
Huh?
So the judges would not accept bribes.
First of all, let's see what's the difference. And then we'll discuss the reasons. You're going straight to the reasons before we know it.
In one, they're being given the money, in the other, they're taking it, like a lawyer in a contingency fee case.
Where is the given?
Here, it says the temple fund would pay them in 5a, and then in b, it says they levied fines, and they would take their wages, take, and not be given.
And then, go further. If was not sufficient,
Then their wages would be raised, wages would be raised even if they said no.
so the difference between the 5a, all the other, they would get a certain amount, whatever they worked. They had certain hours to work. Whatever amount they got, they got. If it was enough or not enough, wasn't there enough for them to leave with that money or not, that was not the question. They got whatever they worked for, and they were sent home. When it comes to 5b, the judges in Jerusalem, they would get a very high amount. The 99 maneh a year was considered to be a very high number. But even if it was not sufficient, they would give them more. They would offer them more, even though the judge may say, I don't want it more. They would still tell them, you have to take more. Now we understand. Obviously, now we're going to the reason behind it. That you explained, I did not say that, but you said it, is because the judge should not take bribe. Is that the only reason?
To be fair,
Is that the only reason that you would come up with that answer, or there is maybe other reasons?
Well, maybe they were more esteemed. Maybe that was a high position, so you wanted to keep your judges happy.
Why? Why couldn't they get another job? If it was not sufficient, then
shouldn't
the
be
judge
pressure
go
on
do
them.
something.
They shouldn't have pressure financially when their wife wants a Rolls Royce.
Maybe, maybe
No.
if they had a financial, maybe if they had a financial hardship, it would influence their decision.
Shouldn't be any effect when they judge
No.
about their man.
For being a judge, you want the more talented people. So you
Okay.
have to give them the right amount, so the more talented people will agree to become judges.
So basically what you're all saying is, number one, first of all, you want a talented people, that's correct. B, obviously you don't want them to depend and look somewhere else for income. C, you want the community to respect them. And the more they're getting paid, the more the community respects them. And there is another reason. If you want to have respect for that person who has influence, who has to make decisions for the sake of the community, that person has to be fully involved with the community. They cannot start looking for other positions. Because if they will be start looking for different positions to fill in their gaps, who will be losing out of it is the community. Because they will make up the gap from somewhere else. So the Talmud says very clearly, when it comes to judges, there is an obligation that the community should give them even above and beyond, even when they say no. So here we understand the difference is, if you turn to page 42, the difference between, who wants Yaakov? You want to read it for us?
Which one?
A, B, C, 42, 2.3.
2.3. Factors for awarding a living wage. Public sector employees who cannot take a second job either because they have no time or because to do so will undermine their ability to fully engage in their important work.
So stop right there. Who is this applying to? What kind of public sector employee who cannot take a second job, either because they have no time or because to do so will undermine their ability to fully engage in their important work? Who is that?
Judges.
Judges. Then there is another B.
Public sector employees who need to be resistant to the pressure of those who wish to undermine justice by bribing them.
So now is number B already. Now the second level. It's the first stage was the welfare of the community. Now they can be also pressure, financial pressure, to undermine justice. So we have to prevent that as well. That's why it's number B. Number C.
Well, it doesn't apply just to judges. It could apply also to police force also.
Correct.
Public sector employees who need the respect of the community that results from adequate pay.
The community will have more respect when those people who are supposed to be the judges of the community will be well taken care of. And
Question,
is for discussion.
which of these factors apply to the rabbis asking for a raise?
What do you think? Of the A, B, C, which ones applies for the, what would apply the answer to this question that the rabbi wants to have a raise? Should we give him a raise?
All three would apply.
Yes, you should.
Which one of the three is the most important?
A.
Okay,
Then
why
C.
not?
Well, C, respect.
A,
Rabbi
C, and B.
No, hey, you can't have him take another job. Does that may conflict with rabbinical work?
Correct. They cannot, so you're saying A.
Right.
Hey.
Based on what we learn now, what do you think was the answer of the Khatam Sofer? If the rabbi was making marriages, divorces, running the court case, teaching, doing all the work in the community to keep the community moving and going, what do you think would be the answer of the Khatam Sofer when he asked for a higher raise?
Didn't the rabbi have a contract?
Huh?
Pay more than what he asked.
But didn't the rabbi have a contract?
Correct. But did you read the question?
Times change.
Yeah, right, I remember the times changed, he had a contract.
And the money devalued it. So there's two factors happened.
Isn't a contract?
There is a contract and there is a change of the situation. So that's why they send the question.
But also in the question, there is not enough funds, they said. The community does not have enough funds.
They were not
As
rolling
is
in
the
extra
thing.
money. That's correct.
They don't have the funds.
So what is the solution? Is to compromise and get a judge that doesn't require that much and get somebody who is not that level so you
Next
can...
town's community, they put their minds together and have, part-time rabbi.
But he's speaking, he's not just a part-time rabbi, he's speaking also the judge who's running the community. And in those days specifically, it wasn't just a pulpit rabbi who gives you a speech, but was more marriages, divorce, problems, family problems, issues, to deal day-to-day fights, financial disagreements among people, they come to settle the disputes and so on. So you're not speaking about someone like just a figure, but much more leading the community, and that person has to live to a value of justice and not to cave into any pressure. Two people come, one is the wealthy guy of town and one is the poorest guy of town. Who should you listen more? That's the question, right? And it's a very strong question. Who is right, who is wrong? Try to say that the wealthy guy is wrong. Your salary will be cut to nothing. If that would be the question, so can he be a real judge? He can never be a judge. Yeah.
Well, the question assumes that if you give somebody a substantial wage, they won't be corrupted, when in fact, the evidence shows that the most corruptible people are the people with the most money. The Congress makes six-figure salaries and million-dollar pensions, and they're all thieves, basically. So, how much is enough? I mean, do you need a private jet? So the idea that you can't corrupt somebody who's making substantial money,
The
certainly
question
these days
is,
is
what is
ridiculous.
called substantial money, and what is it called to making a comfortable living so he doesn't have to run to find another
Well,
job?
somebody today who makes $150,000 or $175,000, they may not be rich, but it's certainly not poverty level. And they're stealing every second.
The question is, depends how members of their family. Did you see
A
the...
man who fears God could make $25,000, to be more honest.
Talking about private.
It all
planes.
depends.
No, it's about public employees.
Okay, thousands of private planes are in this country. Thousands, not hundreds. Okay, you have 300 concert people. Why don't give them private planes so
300
they
what?
will not be under pressure?
Give
I
them-
think they are underpaid.
Give them a Rolls Royce.
Yes. Why
The
not?
question is as follows.
Then they will not be corrupted.
To whom
You pay for it anyway.
To whom do you think we have to allocate our resources? Is the allocation of our resources should be given to teachers, firefighters, the judges,
Everybody.
the mayor of the town? Who do you want to allocate the resource? Or we should think, forget about all of those. We should worry about the poor people. So, when you deal with the community, and the community has all aspects of the community, the question is, where are we putting the focus on? Who are the leaders? What kind of system has to work? So the Torah has a certain way that leads and teaches us how to live a life that really produces a certain way that can benefit and create a community that will live. Okay, let me go to the place where we meet.
So did we get the answer of what Rabbi Sofer mentioned? Oh, that goes.
Not yet. Not yet. You know what? I open up page 42, you will read it for us. Text 6.
Certainly in this case, the community should be compelled.
If you want to lock the door, you can lock the door. Come.
Certainly in this case, the community should be compelled to meet the needs of the rabbi. There will be necessity to adjust the contract in any case because the value of the original salary had decreased due to the change in currency and inflation. How much more so now that his family size has increased, may God watch over them.
And the question is basically, there is a contract, but the money devaluated, and the family also grew. And how much is it right for the family to grow on the one hand, on the other hand, the same contract, what was signed 2 years ago, 3 years ago, doesn't suffice, because the value of that currency was devaluated. Happens, right?
It happens when you have a central bank, which is a private bank that prints.
And that was in Europe, by the way.
That's why you had Hitler, from the hyperinflation caused by the central bank, ultimately.
But the response doesn't cite any of the criteria given above. It seems to be an argument from fairness and equity, or the personal needs of the rabbi, rather than saying respect to the community, or so he won't take a second job, and so forth. It doesn't seem to cite the criteria that were listed previously.
Just the last sentence, I didn't hear?
His argument doesn't cite 2.3 A, B, or C. It's more of an argument out of fairness.
Correct. But why was he came to that fairness? The reason why he came to that fairness is because A, B, and C.
Okay.
If there wouldn't be A, B, C, there would be no reason. So you don't like him, he needs a job, you need to change to find somebody that can afford your budget, change him. What's the big deal? However, if you want the community to be stable and grow, you need to find a way so you have a real judge, somebody who can really affect the community and so on. Again, we are discussing over here not just a pulpit rabbi. The discussion was about specifically a rabbi that is also serving as a judge in the community. So that is very clear that the community needs a person to mitigate, to make peace in the community, to create connections between the one to another and so on. So if the community would change or find somebody who is a lesser quality, it wouldn't be producing good for the community. So for the sake of the community, for the benefit of the community, you need someone who can do this work and not someone who cannot produce this. Let's Moshe read line number 42 and activity 2. So now let's go in and understand. Let us try.
Let us try to apply this to the modern reality. There are various public servants in today's world who can perhaps fit into one of the above categories. Perhaps there are public servants who fit into 2 of the 3, or all 3, or none. How would you complete the following table? Compare your answer with a partner. Do your assessment differ?
A police officer. Read the top. Important
So
responsibility.
the categories are important responsibilities, compromise, if forced to take an additional job, fabric of society undermined by succumbing to a bribe, requires the respect of the community.
So which one would you say is a police officer?
All 3.
I'd say bribe is the most important.
Yes.
Okay.
But also the first one, all 3.
But if he took a night job,
Doesn't hurt anyone. He can find another job. Police officers have other jobs.
Security was many of them.
How does it look if the police officer, your neighbor, you see working in Dunkin' Donuts at night?
Or you can take a security job. Doesn't have to be next to you.
I think they take it after they retire.
But it's not it's not somebody that if they take another job, you lose respect for them. They are there to watch the law.
But you almost.
They have a job here and then they can have a job another place too, if they want.
But it's a potential to succumbing to a bribe, that if that guy is doing something illegal, he's afraid to stop him even as an officer because he would lose his job. So it makes the condition a little bit more difficult.
In reality, every police officer, whether it's in Kings Point or in Nassau County, they work side hours on their security. Does it diminish their respect or they take pride because of that? No. It's just an extra income for them. If they can do extra hours, Sunday, weekend sometimes, and they choose to do that, does it diminish their respect in the community? Absolutely not.
I don't think they do that though. I think it's only when they retire.
No, they do that.
Sure.
We actually hire for security when we need
The local
police
guys,
officers.
the local guys make a lot less money. The community police officers, Kings Point, the Nassau County cops make a fortune, especially with overtime.
Well, it happens to be actually the opposite.
Kings Point makes more than Nassau County?
Correct.
Oh, well, then they'll need a second job.
You don't have enough
Oh.
information.
Wow.
Anyway,
More than
How much money do they make in Kings Point?
we'll talk about it after.
More than
Well,
that.
not now. It's not funny.
I'm gonna become a cop.
School teacher. What do you think about school teacher? To which category do they belong?
They get off at 2 a.m., 2 p.m., so they can do work after hours.
Okay,
respect to the community,
Huh?
respect to the community.
Could become tutors.
So you would recommend them to have extra job days?
Yes.
Firefighters.
They definitely have second jobs.
Hmm?
No, the society's undermined if they're succumbing to a bribe, though. So they look,
They're not just, they're not people who are in justice or...
No, but if they overlook a fire code or, you know, hey, overlook this violation, use a finger large in the palm, don't look at that illegal fire trap eye.
That's not the firefighter, that's more the inspectors, right?
Yeah. The next one is interesting. Bob, the
Can I
question
read
is to
it?
you.
It says exactly what I said at the beginning of this lecture.
Here.
Minimum wage laws, do you want me to read? Page 44?
No,
Oh,
President
President of the United States. I wish he would take an additional job.
Okay, let's go to page 44, we'll skip it next.
You will take a different job.
44? We are?
Yeah, go ahead, 7
This
days.
this is good.
A minimum wage,
Minimum wage laws are about as clear a case as one can find.
I just want to introduce that, son.
Okay.
There is two opinions. Obviously, this is Milton Friedman's opinion, but there is a second opinion. You'll
Karl
read them
Marx.
both. Okay, no. Another Jew.
Yeah, Paul Krugman. The same thing as Karl Marx.
Minimum
wage laws are about as clear a case as one can find of a measure the effects of which are precisely the opposite of those intended by the men of goodwill who support it. Many proponents of minimum wage laws quite properly deplore extremely low rates. They regard them as a sign of poverty, and they hope by outlawing wage rates below some specified level to reduce poverty. In fact, insofar as minimum wage laws have any effect at all, their effect is clearly to increase poverty. The state can legislate a minimum wage rate. It can hardly require employers to hire at that minimum all who were formerly employed at wages below the minimum. It is clearly not in the interest of the employers to do so. The effect of the minimum wage is therefore to make unemployment higher than it otherwise would be. Insofar as the low wage rates are in fact a sign of poverty, the people who are rendered unemployed are precisely those who can least afford to give up the income they had been receiving, small as it may appear to those voting for the minimum wage.
So, give us a little bit summary.
It's exactly what I said in the first few minutes, that all you do is you stop entry-level people from getting jobs because an employer who otherwise, for a small amount of money, might give people a job. Many of these jobs are second jobs or third jobs to make extra income, like a security guard. They'll just say, well, you know what? If I have to pay $10 an hour or $20 an hour or $50 or $100 an hour, guess what? I'm not hiring anybody.
Now turn to page 45, 7b. Let's take another view of another opinion. And I want you later on to tell me which opinion do you agree
I'm
with.
Blinder, give me a break.
Go ahead.
Blinder is a good name. Blind. You want me to read it?
Absolutely.
Elementary economic theory insists that a higher minimum wage must reduce employment. On this basis, many people dismiss recent scholarly evidence suggesting that higher minimum wages may not cost the country jobs. Perhaps the elementary theory is, well, too elementary. Two of my Princeton, I'm impressed, colleagues have been attacked regularly and roundly for their research, suggesting that an increase in the minimum wage might not decrease the number of jobs. But how could jobs not be lost when basic economic theory insists on the opposite conclusion? Here are three possibilities. The simple theory disregards the costs of training new employees. Paying a higher minimum wage might reduce job turnover enough to pay for itself, leaving companies with no incentive to reduce employment. The simple theory also ignores the problem of recruiting new workers. Employers with many minimum wage workers may be reluctant to fill vacancies by offering higher pay because they will have to increase the wages of their existing workers as well. A higher minimum wage which equalizes the pay for all workers makes this issue moot. Minimum wage labor may often be a small and relatively fixed proportion of costs, which include more expensive labor and machinery. In that case, the increase in the minimum wage may only slightly affect businesses' total costs. I do not know if any of those alternative theories are true, but the list demonstrates that one can accept the new empirical findings and still be a card-carrying economist. Where does this dueling evidence and theory leave us? In my view, it justifies agnosticism. Those who want to raise the minimum wage have not taken leave of their senses, have not forsaken basic economic principles, and have not cooked the books. Frankly, I do not know whether a modest minimum wage increase would decrease employment or not. If it does, the effect will likely be very small.
So obviously, we see there is a debate. Obviously, everyone can have their opinion. And the debate is between scholars and people who care for society, care for the community, happen to be both are Jews. And Jewish people have diversity of opinions, which is okay.
Karl
You're
Marx
allowed
was a
to.
Jew.
Correct. But doesn't mean one is 100% wrong, the other one is 100% right. Sometimes you have to implement this way, and sometimes you have to implement that way. But interestingly enough, I am not an expert, so I'm not going to tell you what's my opinion, because my opinion doesn't matter in that case. But interestingly enough, the Torah does not recommend or suggest anywhere a minimum wage. Nowhere in the Torah recommends for a minimum wage. Not because the Torah says it's incorrect. The Torah doesn't go there. The Torah has other ways and solutions to take care of the needs of a community, but does not recommend minimum wage. Yes.
Here's what I think the problem is here. We're not distinguishing what Torah says, which a person voluntarily obeys. If he doesn't obey, he's committing a sin, and it's between him and God. So what Torah says is something totally different in the United States, as opposed to what the government says. Because when the government says something, if you disobey, you get killed if you resist. Whereas in Judaism, it's voluntary. You choose to obey the Torah, and it's between you and God if you sin. So what applies in terms of Torah is something totally different than applies in the United States. Now, if we were living in Israel, that would be a different story, in my opinion.
Reb Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, I'm sure you heard of him. Once Erev Pesach in the afternoon, when already everyone burned their chametz, he called in his assistant and he says, listen, I must have a piece of challah now. Rabbi, Erev Pesach, it's already, in an hour or two will be Pesach. Nobody has challah now. Listen, I'm willing to pay $1,000. 1,000 ruble. Just get me a challah from a Jewish home. I need a kosher challah. The assistant says the Rebbe is insisting. He went outside, went around to ask anyone has a piece of challah left. I'll pay 1,000 ruble. And everyone said, I'm sorry, nothing left. So he came back and the Rebbe says, make it 5,000 ruble. I need a piece of challah. I must have it. So he went back. 5,000 ruble for a piece of challah. Nowhere to be found. Came back. So Rabbi Levitza says to him, listen, you know, the government recently prohibited to deal with cigarettes and it was outlawed. I need a case of cigarettes for the holiday. Offer them 200 ruble for a case of cigarettes. Went outside, 3 minutes later he came back, here is a box of cigarettes. So Levitza turned around, what's going on here? The government has so many thousands of soldiers, police officers and everything, and if you want to get a box of cigarettes, boom, 200 ruble, you got it. Here I paid 5,000 ruble to get a piece of challah that's worth maybe 5 cents. And I paid 5,000. And God has no police, has no soldiers, and I couldn't find any. So to say that the Torah, who cares whether the Torah is voluntary? When the Torah says something, it's much more than voluntary. It's something that comes
It's
from the heart.
voluntary on your part.
There is no obligation. However, there is an obligation much deeper than the government. So when the government says something, it's one type of obligation. When the Torah says it's much deeper than that. That's what I'm trying to say. So let's analyze what the Torah has to say. How do we solve an issue of economics in a community? In a community that has different levels. Let's go to the next. Shmuel, you want to read for us? Page 47, 8a.
If there will be among you a needy person, you shall not harden your heart, and you shall not close your hand to your needy brother. Rather, you shall surely open your hand to him, and you shall give him sufficient for his needs, which he is lacking. For there will never cease to be needy within the land. Therefore, I command you, saying, you shall surely open your hand to your brother, to your poor one, and to your needy one in your land.
Tzedakah, the word tzedakah comes from the word tzedek, means justice. When we give charity, is not we giving voluntary how much as we want. We're giving because it's just to give charity. It's not ours. It's God gave it to us, so we are messengers to pass it over, to pass it on to the right channels. So whatever is just, you don't give just a penny or a dollar. You give generously, because it's not mine to hold on. When the Torah says, Aser al menat shetisher, 10% in order to become wealthy, this 10% doesn't belong to us. It has to go out immediately to where it belongs. So we are not the one to keep it. So it is justice to move it on, this 10% to give it over. And then we're not speaking about helping a poor man. Okay, give him $1, let him be happy. Here is $1 for you. That's not what the Torah says. The Torah says, Patoach tiftach, a double sentence. Open and wide open your hand. And how much should you open? Open your hand to suffice his needs, which he is lacking. All the needs of the poor person. Am I obligated to give him all his needs? That's his problem. I'll give him whatever, a few pennies. But the Torah does not. The Torah says, the way God created the world, there are givers and takers. And the famous story is, once a rabbi came before Pesach to a wealthy man, I need Maot Kimcha de Pischa to help out the poor people in town. I need money from you to help out for the holiday. And I think you should give me $10,000. So the poor man, the wealthy man started to cry, oh, the economy is so bad, the business is doing so badly, how can I afford to pay it? So the rabbi says, if that's the case, I have to put you on the other side. Instead of giving, you will get money, so I will give you money. Oh, no, don't put me there. I don't want to know. No, don't put me there, because there I don't want to belong. So you can be in one side or the other side, the rabbi said to you. Or you are a giver or you are a taker. But the Torah says when we give, we have to give with a very generous open hand, because that is the nature of the world. It will never cease to be people who need the money. That's the way God created the world. Must be recipients, because this is how the world can sustain itself. That must be recipients, and then because they are recipients, must be givers who will be giving. And the Torah says that there is an obligation to give. So what is the obligation to give? Comes the question, how much is it? 8b, continue Shmuel.
We are commanded to give to a poor person in accordance with what he or she lacks. If they lack clothing, we clothe them. If they lack household utensils, we purchase them for them. If they are unmarried, we help them to marry.
So here, the Maimonides is very clear. If it's clothing, if it's home, if it's even a wedding, you make them a wedding. The way a wedding should be. And the question of discussion is,
in what way is this different from a living wage?
is there a difference between living wages and what the Torah says we are obligated to do?
Yes, the Torah doesn't mandate a living wage, but rather says people should be taken care of in accordance to what they need.
Now, who should be taken care of?
The community.
How? What should be done? How can the community, what way? Continue 8c.
It appears that the above law only applies to the trustee of the communal charity fund or to the community at large. However, an individual is not obligated to give the poor all of their needs. Rather, it's proper to notify the public about the poor person's plight. If, however, there is no public fund available, then the individual should give according to the needs of the poor person, if he can afford it.
So whose responsibilities? Individual, the poor man, the government? Who is this? Remember that we discussed about it? The beginning?
The communal charity fund.
So has to be a community charity fund. In every community must be such a fund that people donate to that fund to help out the less fortunate people, number one. But if the public does not provide, is the individual obligated or not? Let's go next. 49, text 9.
In every city where Jews live, they are obligated to appoint trustworthy, well-known individuals as trustees of a charitable fund. They should circulate among the people every Friday and collect funds based on their assessment of what each person is able to give. They distribute the money to the needy every Friday. We have never seen or heard of a Jewish community that does not have a charity fund.
So the Maimonides again is very clear. Every community has a charity fund. People donate, but if the charity fund doesn't have enough funds, so then each individual can give as much as they wish to give. There is no obligation, but each individual can fill in the gap what the community doesn't have.
Well, it says the individual should give according to the need of the person if he can afford it. So there is an obligation on page 48, the bottom of page 48. If, however, there is no public fund available, then the individual should give if he can afford it.
Here, if he can afford it, as much as he can afford it, he should give.
So it's an obligation as much as you can afford.
Correct. You cannot give if you cannot afford it, obviously. But the obligation first lays on the community. And each person of the community is obligated to give to that fund. It's regardless what's the level of wealth. Each person has to give a very sizable amount of donation to this fund to help out the less fortunate people.
Does that exist today? I mean, is this fictional?
First of all, it exists. Secondly, it gives us an idea to create such a fund. It exists, but it's not really active. Should be an active fund. A community must have an active fund to help less fortunate people. And has to be for that Gaba'ei Tzedakah. Gaba'ei Tzedakah means who are in charge to collect this money, put in the money and see to give it out. So every week they can give it out and make sure that the people who are less fortunate getting this money. Now there is a way, there is an issue. When you come to someone and you offer them money, you may insult them. You can be a nice guy, you want to give them now money, but what you're doing is degrading their dignity. Is it better to give them money and offer them money, but you're degrading them? Or there is a better way to do that, not to degrade their dignity? Because we're speaking about dignity of a person, of a human being, is very important. How do we deal with that?
You can give it confidential.
You can give them confidentially, but the moment you gave them, they saw you, you saw them,
They can give it.
they cannot look on you anymore because they needed your help. People have a little bit self-respect. Don't see that they can already face you. You helped them. They needed you. So the fact is that the Torah applies and speaks about degrading a human person's kavod, respect, self-respect is very important.
Aren't they doing something for you too?
Hmm?
I'm saying the person you're giving, in a way, they're doing something for you too.
They're doing for you more than you do for them. But and the reality is that they're getting it from you.
But they don't
For
see
them,
it.
it's affecting.
But they don't see it that way.
Obviously, for them, they're getting, not they're giving. A person likes to give. No one likes to get. So the fact that they're getting is not something that should be discussed. So what is the disadvantage of using the tzedakah system against to win the war against poverty? What's the disadvantage of tzedakah system?
You can subsidize laziness.
That's one thing. And for that, the Torah says, will soon apply to that. If a person says, I don't want to do nothing, just give me charity, the community is not obligated to give them charity. The community is obligated to give charity only to one who is looking for a job, cannot find a job, and needs help. The community helps. But if that person deliberately decides, I'm going to the beach every day, you will support me, the community will tell him, go home. Will not support you. So that point is taken out. So what's, again, another problem of supporting, giving charity?
It doesn't get to the root of the problem, which is poverty, which is lack of employment opportunities.
Right. So let's go next, Doctor. Page 50, text 10.
The highest degree of giving tzedakah exceeded by none is that of a person who assists the poor Jew by providing him with a gift or a loan, or by accepting him into a business partnership, or by helping him find employment, so that he will no longer need to ask for other people's aid. A lesser level than that is to give charity to the poor without knowing to whom one gives and without the recipient knowing from whom he received it. This is like the anonymous funds that existed in the Holy Temple. There the righteous gave in secret and the poor were supported in secret. Giving to a charity fund is similar to this mode of charity.
So here we understand Lishkat Hashaim, that was the name of the charity fund in the Beit HaMikdash. The people would come and there would be a box and they would throw money inside the box. Nobody would know how much. They would throw as much as they wish. And then on the other side there was a door that nobody can see who's coming. The poor people would open up the door and take whatever they need and leave. They would not know who put the money and they did not know who took the money. Nobody knew that. That was in the Beit HaMikdash. You were laughing. I
Yeah, because
understand. Because you
the
can take
font
whatever
would be
you want.
empty immediately in New York. So.
However, in Yerushalayim, that's the way it worked. In the Shkat Hashem, it was in the holy temple in Yerushalayim. People would come and take whatever they need. If they need tomorrow, they come again and take again tomorrow. Whatever you need for today, you go in and take it. Nobody would stop you. So, but this is not the greatest charity. What's the greatest charity is? To help someone to find a job. That's the greatest charity. If someone can help someone to find a job, this is number one. And to make it, if you already have to give it and make it least possible to insult them, you say, it's a gift for you. I heard you had a birthday or something. I would like to give you a gift for that. So that's also helping in a way to alleviate the dignity of the person. Michael, did you read it already or not?
Mm-hmm.
Yes? Okay. Who didn't read yet? Go ahead. Page 51, text 11.
What type of a gift I'm sorry for that. What type of a gift you're talking about?
Gift, whatever.
Such a gift that it doesn't need any money no more?
No, anything that you can help is better than nothing. That's what it calls.
So that's the biggest tzedakah than giving in private without even...
Well, if you come to him here, it's tzedakah for you. You make them feel bad. But here is a gift for you. I want to share with you simcha, with you joy. I want to be part of it. So you make them feel good. So that's also important. Very, very important when you do give to a poor man charity and the poor man needs your help. Don't give him with a face, here is money, go. Give him with a face, wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity, giving me the opportunity to help, to do something. Thank you. It, with a smile, makes that charity go a long way.
I think it's in the context of, it says gift or a loan. I think it's in the context of doing something that he can make money with that gift.
And create
right?
something with
To
that.
create
You can
something.
give him
Because
a-
it says to give gift or a loan or by accepting him into a business partnership.
Correct.
So it's more concerned about making him to fish rather than giving him to fish.
Correct. Even though you're saying a loan, but you don't mean a loan.
Yes.
Say, take a loan, take a loan. Okay.
A loan, you don't have to pay it.
Don't worry about it
Yeah.
whenever you want to pay.
That's correct.
Flay.
Page 51.
In the marketplace to earn wages, but do not say I'm a priest and a great man and it's beneath my dignity.
So the Talmud is actually encouraging a person. Do whatever work you should do, but never say, I don't want to do the work. It's not my dignity to work. Any job that supports is important to do that. And goes a step further.
Should you see your enemy's donkey crunching under his burden, would you refrain from helping him? You should surely help along with him.
Torah says further, Azov ta'azov imo. You have to help to unload the donkey, but the Torah adds one word, imo. Imo means with him. If the poor man says, I don't want to do nothing, you are obligated to help me, so do the job for me. You don't have to help him. If only the poor man helps himself, you got to help him too. But if the poor man says, I don't want to help myself, you just help me, you're not obligated. Halach, go one more step, 12b.
But how it applies to Peah Shechachah? It says just leave it there and whoever comes
Well,
wants to
there
come and
is,
take it.
Shechachah and Peah, it's only one of the 21 types of charities. It's not the greatest again. But that also has to be there in case there are people who need it. It's not, they have to come to your field to pick it up. No? What's Shechachah Peah? It's in your field and they have to come all the way to you. Not you
Maybe
bringing
that
it to
person
them.
doesn't deserve it because he doesn't have food because he's lazy, he didn't work. He said, you know what, it's on the field. I'll go pick it up.
Who are we to judge? You're not giving him $1 million. You're giving him Shechachah Peah, whatever it's lost anyway. It's lost anyway. it's nobody will pick it up. So at least this poor man should pick it up. He shouldn't die from hunger. But to encourage, to give him more gifts because of that, not. You're not obligated. But the minimum, you have to at least sustain him. He should be at least, chas v'shalom, not to die from hunger.
Sonacha is it talking about between a Jew and a Jew?
What again?
Sonacha, כי תראה חמור סונך עובד שכר מסור.
ודאי, Jew can, unfortunately it happens too.
But what about if it's a Jew with a goy?
You still have to help. You gotta help,
That's
because
advice
we're
for a
speaking
goy.
also a donkey. An animal needs help. He's heavy, under heavy burden. You need to release him. But you have to release if his owner is with you, doing the job. If the owner is not doing the job, you're not obligated to do that.
But the obligation is only between a Jew and a Jew.
Correct. But L'pnei darkei shalom, for the sake of peace, we help everyone. Not only Jewish people. We help also non-Jews. 12b, one more sentence.
If he sits off the side, if he sits off to the side and says, you have the obligation, if you wish to unload, do so by yourself, then you're not obligated to tend to the animal, for it says with him.
Okay. So here we understand very clearly, Azov ta'azov imo, that we have to help someone who helps others. Just going to introduce you with a small introduction. There was one once a young man by the name Bernie was walking down the street, and suddenly around the corner there was a huge crash. He looks around and he sees a huge truck. This kosher wine turned over, and all the bottles of wine are broken, and the wine is spilling all over. And thank God the driver is fine, he's okay. And a lot of people got together and they're looking, and thank God nobody's hurt. Wine is spilling, and the driver started to cry. So one of the people walked out and says, "Why are you crying?
You're alive.
Thank God you're okay, you're not hurt. Are you hurt? Is anything?" "No, I'm fine, but I know I have such a difficult boss that I will go there back and the boss will make me to pay for these losses. He will take off my paycheck and I will have no money left to survive." And he's crying. And a man walks out from the crowd and says, "Guys, don't you see the man, the poor guy is crying? He'll have to lose all his money for that." He takes off his hat, puts it next to the driver, and puts $20 inside the hat. And turns to the crowd, "Hey guys, everyone please help out. Put something in the hat." And everyone started to come closer and put money in the hat. The hat filled up with cash, and everyone put more and more. And by the end, when it was packed and everyone gave all their whatever they wanted, the man walked over to the driver and says, "Here is the money with the hat. Take my hat too. Go to the office and pay your boss." And Bernie turns around to the driver. "This is such a mensch. Such a good man. Look what he did." And the driver says, "Yeah, he's a good mensch. He's my boss." This is the introduction to the next part. How do we deal with employees? Employer and employees. Whose obligation is it? So the Talmud brings a very interesting story that happened. Want to read it for us?
Sure.
56. 14b.
Page 56. Okay, it happened once that some carters negligently broke a barrel of wine belonging to Rabbah, the son of Bar-Hanan. Rabbah then confiscated some of the potter's clothing as restitution, the potters went to Rav to file a complaint. Rav said to Rabbah, give them back their clothing. Rabbah asked Rav, is this the law? Rav replied, yes, as it is written, in order that you go on the path of the good. He gave them back their garments. The potters then complained to Rav, we are poor and we work all day, we are starving and have nothing to eat. Rav told Rabbah, pay them their wages. Rabbah asked, is this the law? Rav responded, yes, as the same verse concludes, and keep the ways of the righteous.
So is it the law? Imagine you have a negligent worker who comes and it breaks a bottle of wine or a whole barrel of wine, and you take away from him something, you go to the rabbi says, not only doesn't have to pay you, but you pay him. And pay him for the day too. Is that the law? Actually, the law is not like that. The law, if you have a negligent worker who doesn't produce, doesn't do, you don't have to pay him. And if he breaks something, he's responsible, not you are responsible. But obviously, Rabbah Bar Hanan was one of the righteous leaders of the generation. So Rav said to him, you don't act according to the Torah. You should act beyond the letter of the law. The letter of the law, you're correct. You don't have to pay him. You deserve to take his garment away. But you as a leader, you have to be beyond the letter of the law.
Since when you Mosif on the it says Al Tigra Al Tosif, so
it's not. V'orchot tzadikim tishmor. Gemara brings a pasuk. It's not just made it up. V'orchot tzadikim tishmor, that righteous people don't go just by the word of the law. They go beyond the letter of the law. And if you read also 14a now, page 55, 14a, 55.
Jerusalem was destroyed only because they gave judgments in accordance with the Torah law. Were they then to have judged in accordance with barbaric standards, rather interpret as follows, because they based their judgments strictly upon Torah law and did not go beyond the requirements of the law.
Again, Talmud Bavli in Baba Metzia says, why was the Jerusalem Holy Temple destroyed? Because you follow just the strict word of the law. Sometimes you have to go beyond. Give you just an example of Rabbi Zushi of Anipoli. And Rabbi Zushi was a very poor man. Really was poor beyond poorness you can imagine. But his wife insisted she needs a new dress because she has to go to a wedding, for a family wedding, and she needs finally a new dress. And she was nudging and asking, till finally Rabbi Zushi went and borrowed money. And he gave her the money to buy the material. And she went and bought beautiful material, and she showed to Rabbi Zushi. Rabbi Zushi was very happy for her. Say, go to the how do you call it? A tailor and make yourself a nice dress. A week, 2, 3, 4 go by, and he doesn't. They go soon to the wedding, and he doesn't see she has a dress. So finally, she asked her, "What happened to the dress? Did you have a chance to finish it already?" She says, "Yes," and she doesn't want to say much. Where's the dress? What happened? Finally, she had no choice. She admitted, I went to the tailor to pick up the dress, and I see he gave a very deep sigh. So I asked him, what happened? And he says that his future son-in-law came into his shop, saw him working in a dress, and he liked the dress so much. He asked, for whom are you doing it? For my future wife? So he said, no. I'm doing it for a customer. So the future son-in-law said to him, I don't understand, do you take care of your own family ever? Your daughter has nothing to wear, and she's a kala, she's getting married. Don't you have to worry about her a little bit, do something for her? And he was about to break this engagement. And that's what he told Reb Zushi's wife. Reb Zushi's wife says, of course, take the dress, give it to your daughter. So what would you expect Reb Zushi to say? What would you say to your wife? Kol hakavod. You know what was Reb Zushi's question? Reb Zushi asked his wife, did you pay him for the work? Did you pay him? This poor tailor worked for you a whole week. He needed money for his family. Is it his fault that you decided to give this present to his daughter? But he has to get paid, he has to buy food. So she went and borrowed money to pay the tailor now for the work. Is that the law? No. But that means beyond the letter of the law.
Spirit of the law.
Question is now back to you guys. Why did the judge got beaten up?
He was
Because?
he was the reincarnated person who gave him the money.
Why was he, the judge, beaten up, I'm asking the question.
I'm saying the judge.
He didn't go beyond the letter of the law.
What was beyond the letter of the law?
To actually not to go by what he judged, but
So
by
that's
saying
okay.
give it to the right person.
The letter of the law would be whatever he said, but beyond the letter of the law would be
because he knew
compromise. Share it. Okay, maybe the letter of the law you're right, but in this case, the order is to share it. So at least give him half of it. So he shouldn't become a poor man because you're getting everything. He doesn't have proof, okay, so that's why he lost half. But he should lose everything. So the judge has to use somehow logical sense compiled with the law of the Torah.
What if he was lying? He didn't have any paper, they didn't have anything.
You're right. But everyone logically knew that that's his money. So that's why sometimes there is the law, there is beyond the law. Like Reb Zushi says, pay him even though you gave him the dress for his daughter. It's not his fault. He still needs a salary to pay to buy his food. However, there is something more. It's required logic, logical sense to implement within the Torah law. So we are applying logical sense, and that's where the system, the way the Torah presents, there is a community, there is the obligation of each one to look, to help out, to find a job for someone who needs a job. There is an obligation to put something, and not just pennies, but to put a nice amount each week so people can live also. There is an obligation for each other. When we understand there is obligation for each other, it's not just charity as much as I want, but there is justice. By me giving, it's creating justice and the right thing for the way Hashem wants to lead His world. Then the world is a different world.
Does a case like that only go to one judge? Or there's three judges? I'm saying there's only one judge makes the decision?
Sometimes one judge makes it because there is a majority always with one judge makes the rule
So
one
there
way
could be
or the
mixed
other.
opinions?
So there is mixed opinions, but one overrules the opinion.
So what was the answer of the Khatam Sofer?
Obviously the Khatam Sofer answered, you have to give the increase in order for the benefit of workers.
It says something. But now, you said something before that the Torah doesn't say anything about minimum wages, but we read that in one town, they're setting their own rules.
Well, they are entitled to set their own rules, but they still are obligated to help as much as the person needs, not the minimum wages. But you are obligated to help whatever that person needs. Even if they need to make a wedding, you are obligated, the community is obligated to make them a wedding. If they're obligated, if they need to have a home, the obligation of the community to pay the rent. And so forth. And the greatest opportunity is to find them a job. Have a wonderful night, everyone, and you want to watch something? I suggest that you call tomorrow. Call her tomorrow. You're absolutely right. Let me ask you this question.
You should always have son-in-laws, God willing.
לילה טוב, הכל בסדר?